Good morning. How is well red beard? It's a damn fine day to talk about some books. And today we're going to do my October 2024 wrap up. Really kind of, I was on a break, on a pause, on a, I don't know, I didn't read much through the summer, but something about October. Um, it might be my birthday. My birthday's at the front end of October, and I got a bunch of books for my birthday. But something about October, the fall, always seems to pull me back in if I'm not, even if I'm on a major slump. I mean, this time of year always pulls me back in. So I started reading late September, and then, like I said, got some books for the birthday, and I've really been reading pretty hardcore this month. I got through 8 books, give or take. I think one of them, like, I'd finished before October actually started. So, but I hadn't done it like in a wrap up like this. But anyway, 8 books, and that's what I read. So we're gonna briefly talk about each of them and kind of pick my favorites. And yeah, that's it. So I always wanted to read The October Country by Ray Bradbury in the month of October. I think I had tried this before and gotten halfway through 100 pages in. I'm not sure. I enjoyed this book. For me, big Bradbury fan. Love Fahrenheit 451. Love The Illustrated Man, which is also a short story collection. I like The Martian Chronicles. I don't think I loved it, but again, I'm not much of a sci-fi reader. Definitely more horror and dark fiction type stuff, crime stuff like that. But anyway, this for me is probably 3 to 3.5 stars. I mean, there were some stories in here I really liked. A lot of it though, they're shorter pieces. I would say the longest story in here is probably maybe 17, 18 pages. A lot of them are more like 10 pages or less. Some of them come off as more comedic, pulpy, maybe but some of my favorites in here were I like the dwarf. I like the next in line. Again, the dwarf is about a dwarf that goes to a carnival thing and sees himself in this mirror that makes him larger and goes every night. Wants to buy a mirror like this, but the attraction owner plays a trick on him. The next in line is about a cemetery in Mexico. This husband and wife are kind of feels like doing a little tour through like small towns in Mexico, taking in the local cuisine and art. And there's this cemetery that, due to the dry conditions, they dig up bodies and put them in this mausoleum, standing there. The next in line, and the bodies are somewhat preserved. And it's this whole thing about paying rent on the grave, and if you don't pay it all up front, then you've got like a yearly fee, and eventually there's no one left to pay that yearly fee. So you get dug up. And anyway, but the wife has got it in her head that she is going to be the next in line. And like the emissary a lot. Cool story about a man and his dog. And anyway, there's some others in here I liked quite a bit, but all in all, probably more along the lines of 3 stars for me. But it's a classic. I mean, it's a October classic if those exist. I read Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. This is the most extreme book that I read this month. It's the most extreme book I've read in a while. And I've done The Slob by Aaron Beauregard. I've done the Womb by Duncan Ralston. Really liked Womb, but on this one, probably 3 stars. Again, someone said it's satirical. It's like kind of a satire piece talking about extreme horror fiction as a whole. I mean, I didn't really get that until someone mentioned it, but it's about a guy that this would be a pretty family friendly wrap up, really, if it wasn't for this book. It's about a guy that likes to have sex with dead people, and coincidentally, he works in a hospital, and coincidentally, there's no cameras in the morgue, and so on and so forth. He meets a maternity doctor that likes to. This is going to sound ridiculous. You're going to think I'm making this shit up. That likes to eat dead babies, and there is and they find, I guess, a little bit of comfort in the fact that they're not the only weird one out there. And but there's this intersection of their two habits, their two hobbies that It's quite. I mean, if it wasn't gross enough, it's pretty freaking gross. And like I said in my review of this, my wife picked this up and just happened to turn to that passage. She's like, "What the hell are you reading?" You know. But anyway, I mean, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. 3 stars for me. Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. I read Fever House by Keith Rawson. I'd only done one of Rawson's book, but my plans are in the next 6 months to read all of Rawson's work. I think there's 6 or 7 out there. I've already started on the sequel of this one called The Devil by Name. It's right here. Already started on the sequel of this one. I really like this. It's very action packed. There are these remnants supposed to be like pieces of a devil, really, pieces of a demon. There's a hand, there's an eye, there's a voice, a recording, so to speak, and really we kind of focus on the hand, but the hand, if you're near it, if you're carrying it, it gives you these, deep, ideas of violence, of doing things, and if anyone dies in the vicinity of the hand, then they come back and they call them the fevered, but zombified, really, and that shit just spreads. And the term fever house is kind of like a location where this stuff gets out of control. So like Portland is like a complete fever house at this point, and they really use the voice. Again, it's a recording with supposed to be a message from a demon or a devil. It's kind of um, they use a vehicle of this popular song by a character in here, Catherine Moriarty, to deliver the voice, and it really kind of brings on the apocalypse. So I can tell you now, because I have started the devil, like this one kind of ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I wasn't really sure. I mean, I knew that the voice had been delivered. I mean, like I said, the hand, it was kind of a centralized thing, right? Like Portland was screwed, but and I knew that the voice had been delivered, but and maybe I was supposed to know the extent of that, but I didn't really. I can tell you that from reading the first 50 pages of The Devil by Name that it's 5 years later, and the world has pretty much gone to shit. The voice was delivered, and it's definitely a post-apocalyptic. This is like a pre-apocalyptic. The next book is like a post-apocalyptic type thing. So anyway, dug this book, 3.5 stars from me. Fever House, Keith Rawson. I did The Plastic Priest by Nicole Cushing. This is my first Nicole Cushing read. A book called A Sick Gray Laugh or Sick Gray Laugh was kind of on my radar a few years ago, but I think it came out in 2019. I didn't pick that one up and read it. I kind of want to. This one, I mean, I didn't love this one. Probably between 2 and 3. I mean, I think it's first of all, it's a novella, and I think it. I don't. I'm going to speak out of turn here. I don't know that it is indicative of the rest of Cushing's fiction, but this one is about a female Episcopalian priest during the time of COVID. Again, Episcopalian faith allows female priests, but she's in a small town in southern Indiana, so dealing with all that maybe small mindedness and again, COVID, Jesus, there were plenty of diseases in Jesus' time and he didn't wear a mask and stuff like that. But dealing with all that and then the whole, remote services, government mandates that, only 10 people can come to a in building service. And so outdoor services, remote services, not a lot of cooperation from her congregation. And she snaps. I mean, and I hesitate to call a female character a mad woman, but it says right here on the back that it says it uses the term mad woman. So there's a snap, and there's this idea of us being plastic action figures for a child like God in the sky to play with until he gets tired of, and that type of thing. Like I said, 2 to 3 stars for me. The Plastic Priest by Nicole Cushing. I also have always had a desire to read Frankenstein. I also wanted to read this in the month of October, Mary Shelley. I don't know why October. I think just because October feels like the horror month, although for me all year long is that way, but feels like the horror month, and it was one of the few horror staples, horror classics that I hadn't gotten to. I wanted to get to it. The thing with this book that kind of got me is that the lore of Frankenstein, the idea, what's the word I'm looking for? The folklore has kind of surpassed the book. I mean, so much so that, I think your average person out there thinks that the monster is called Frankenstein, which the monster really is unnamed. And, Frankenstein is the doctor, or the scientist or whatever. And also, I really thought that this would be more about the process. I've seen, we've all seen the images of Frankenstein, the green, stitched together body parts with the neck bolts and all that. And I kind of felt that this book would be about the creation process, the gathering of the parts, that maybe even a little bit of scientific jargon, and the culmination would probably be the lightning coming down and bringing, Frankenstein to life. It's not that way. This happens very early, and it's, kind of a book about, our past haunting us, and responsibility, scientific responsibility and things like that. Again, the things created very early, abandoned, is just shunned by people, by society. It's so ugly, it's so monstrous, and because of that, resorts to a bit of violence, and ends up, resorting to violence that directly affects Victor Frankenstein. And I mean, anyway, it's a good book. It does not read. I think I said when I reviewed this, I thought this was late 1800s. It's like 1820, I think 1818, something like that. So doesn't read like a book 200 years old. Also love the edition. I've really gotten into these cheap uh, leather bound Barnes and Noble editions, $15. I mean, end papers, and the end papers in the Dracula one are really beautiful. But anyway, so I'm probably 3.5 stars. Again, I love the idea that I've read it. I mean, I definitely see, how important it is to the horror genre, especially to the women in horror fiction part of that. I think she was like 18 years old when she wrote it, 19 when it was published, something like that. But anyway, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. I love this book. I mean, I don't think a 5 star love this book, but I really, really, really like this book, and it's enjoyably complex. It's enjoyably confusing, and Ward does that a lot. Like her the way she writes and the way she sets up twists, um, definitely knock you on your tail. Sometimes I felt that way about Needless Street. I felt that way about Sundial, I think. And this one, it's just layered. There are layers to this story. We start with, 3 kids in a seaside town up in Maine, and there's disappearing women and murders happening, and there's these Polaroids being found, next to children's beds with a hand and a knife at the child's throat. The children aren't dying though, but someone is breaking in, taking these vulnerable pictures of these children, and all this is going on. And but it's a story about their friendship, and summer magic had all the coming of age magic of like a Stand By Me or something like that. And then we break away from that though, like we go into the future, which again, part of me wanted to say, hey, this is another one of those books where I loved the first 100 pages and didn't like the rest of it as much, but there's just so much, again, enjoyable complexity to it. There's a lot going on. There is fiction within fiction. This story is being told multiple different ways from different sources, and that can be confusing. But it's really, it kind of looks at, like, something terrible like that's happened, and it affects 20, 25, 50 people in the town, and they all think that they have some sort of a ownership to that story, but who really owns that? I mean, because these 3 kids had to deal with it. They kind of helped solve it. They kind of found the the bodies, so to speak. And but there's victims, right? There's family members of victims that are affected by this, that maybe didn't know the full story, but had a far greater claim maybe to it, and also it looks at like eternal life in fiction, like, surviving death by being not trapped, but being put in a book. So Looking Glass Sound, very, very original, very um, I mean, it's going to be one of my favorite books I read this year. And again, I was back and forth with that because it will. There are parts of it you'll be like, wait, what? I mean, definitely had some wait, what moments, but really dug this one. Looking Glass Sound, Catriona Award. So, trying to get through the Dark Tower. Um, Early this year, late last year, I redid um, the first three books, The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Three, and The Wastelands. Redid them for the third time. I redid Wizard and Glass for the fourth time. Or, I'm sorry, Wizard and Glass, book four. It was my second time doing it. So I've done the first four books multiple times. This is my first time I did Wolves of the Kala. I got all the way through it. So I've got two and a half, two books left. The reason I say that is because I'm actually doing Wind Through the Keyhole now, which is, was written after, published after the seventh book, but is actually the Dark Tower 4.5. So, anyway, but I did Wolves of Kala. I enjoyed it. Look, I mean, people love these books, and I'll still tell you that while I do like the way it kind of pulls everything else in, I mean, do I like Wolves of the Kala more than I like The Shining or Salem's Lot or The Stand? Or I mean, and again, yes, I know there are ties to all those books, but no, I mean, I'm more of a horror reader than I am a fantasy reader, and these, are more like fantastical style books, I guess. Really enjoyed the fact that Father Callahan from Salem's Lot plays a huge part in this book, and it's my understanding that he will play a huge part in the rest of them. At the end of the day, we're on the path to the Dark Tower. We've um, come across a town that these wolves attack once every like 20 some odd years. It wasn't 27, but 20 some odd years they come, and for whatever reason, everyone in this town has twins. They take one of the twins and they always bring them back, but when they bring them back, they're ruined. ROONT. They're ruined. They're disabled mentally, I think is the way to put that. But and anyway, there's other stuff involved in that. But every 20 some odd years, and the town has just really dealt with it, and they've asked the gunslingers for help stopping these wolves, and so that is the overlying piece. I mean, we are not really traveling a lot. Like we get there and we're going to help these people of Calabrin Sturgis is the name of the town, and but we meet Father Callahan and we hear, oh, we go back and we hear a lot of his story about what happened after his showdown with Barlow. No, no, yeah, Barlow, not Straker, Barlow, with his showdown in Salem's Lot. And to be honest with you, I thought Father Callahan died in that showdown in Mark Petrie's kitchen. Wasn't it Mark Petrie's kitchen where all this happened? Of course, some of the film stuff conflicts with the book in my mind, but I just did Salem's Lot again like a couple years ago. So anyway, I guess I kind of thought he was killed by Barlow in that scene, but he was not. He was Barlow made him drink his blood, not enough to turn him into a vampire though, but enough to kind of haunt him, make him a little bit undead, so to speak, mostly marked and ruined in his own type way. But anyway, we learn a lot more about Father Callahan's story and his role in, I guess, the normal timeline and how he got to this midworld Roland timeline type thing. So yeah, that part of it was really cool. Probably, I don't know. I mean, look again. It's a long book. I'd probably say I'm 3 stars on Wolves of the Kala. So I did You Like It Darker? Short stories. Look, at the end of the day, this was the second book I read coming out of the slump. I read Dead Inside first. It's a page turner because of the extreme nature, but this one really brought me back. Really busted the slump. A lot of the, again, there's something. I know that this book didn't come out. I think it came out last year because, anyways, but it was new to me. It was new in my, and there's something for me about holding a new Stephen King novel, new Stephen King book in the month of October that brings back all the magic of my childhood falling in love with fiction, falling in love with Stephen King's work. So this one again is short stories. Some of them are short, 10 pages or so. Some of them are longer pieces, and I really tended to like the longer stories in this one, but I liked them a lot. And I'm gonna call this book 5 stars, but really, I mean, look, if I was in the midst of, if I'd been reading solid for 12 months, would this book have stood out as much as it did? Maybe not, but because of where I was, I mean, just all the magic of reading, of fiction was back. I really like Two Talented Bastards. I mean, that's a story about two, stand up dudes in the community. They're good guys, but they're, I mean, local celebrities, maybe. I mean, not really, but you know what I'm talking about. The guy that, everybody knows and is always helping people out around town, probably coaching little league, that type stuff. These two guys that are like that, and then they just find, and one of them wrote a bit, like to write stories. One of them liked to draw, like to paint, but they weren't anything special. And all of a sudden, like in their midlife, like late 40s, 50, they found global fame through one writing, one art, and it explains how that happened. I mean, I like the first half of the story a little bit more than the explanation part of it, but really, really dug that story. Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. Loved that story. Story about a guy that gets a single dream where he is shown in a dream that a dead body is buried behind this abandoned gas station out in the middle of nowhere. And he calls in an anonymous tip, and they track him down. And the cops involved think he actually did the killing, and it's a really really cool story. Also liked I like the Answer Man, which is the last story in the book. Which for that one, a guy meets an answer man on the side of the road, and it's one of those things he figures out nobody else can see this guy, and no one can see me when I'm with him. But 3 times in his life he goes and he gets to ask a certain amount of questions for a certain amount of money, and it's just a really really cool story. I mean, got like a Robert Johnson Deal with the Devil type feel to it, but there's one part where like he's asking about his son. I think it's the second time that he goes and meets the answer man, and his son is young and really into baseball. I think it's baseball. And really good. Like, at least in his father's eyes, he's really good. I remember being this way with my daughter and her art. I was like, other second graders are not drawing like this, right? And I was right in that situation. But anyway, but he really thinks his son has got a future in baseball, and he's only got so many questions, and he's like, will my son, play professional baseball? And no. Well, he'll play college baseball? No. Will he play? Is he gonna, play high school baseball? And no. And this kid loves baseball, and so like he just by asking those questions, he's like, "Oh shit, what happens to my son?" And you're out of questions. You know what I mean? That type of thing. But you're like, oh, I mean, just the way that part was written. I mean, this guy had these expectations for his child, and you don't think that you're not even promised tomorrow. That type of feeling. Excuse me, as a parent, it was a rough read. And then Rattlesnakes, probably one of my favorites. I think. Let me see, Rattlesnakes. It is a story about a guy. Uh, he's living, on an island in Florida. But the biggest thing for me on that one was that it was a character from Cujo. It's the father from Cujo, and uh, it's been a long time since I read Cujo, but I almost thought that maybe he wasn't even really a part of the story, or at least existed off screen, kind of, because Cujo's all about the mom and the son in the back car, or in the car with being attacked by the rabid Saint Bernard and all that. Also, did not remember how brutal the ending of Cujo was. I mean, I guess I guess I did not remember. Spoiler alert, if you're going to read Cujo, that the kid does not survive. I did not realize that, but this is about this guy, this father, 30, 40 years later, whatever it is, and still dealing with that, still dealing with the loss of his son, still, dealing with the divorce. I think he divorced from his wife after all that happens. But the coolest thing was that it had ties to Do McKee as well. Like, so it had that story had ties to Cujo, but it also had ties to Do McKee, which I always enjoy that type of stuff. But yeah, really, really like this book. I'm gonna call it 5 stars. I mean, shit, why not? But yeah, that's it. So I read 5 books in the month of October. Back at it, really enjoying it. Already, working on The Devil by Name by Keith Rawson for next month, and already working on The Wind Through the Keyhole. And when I finish that, I'll be going straight into Song of Susanna, I think. So I'm gonna get to that Dark Tower, and if you're here, I'll take you with me. But appreciate you being here, and hope you're enjoying all your books, all of them, as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong damn books.